We'll be starting in 1 minute. Thank you. Thank you. Testing the sound, testing the sound. Just doing a sound check.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Shavua Tov. Maybe we should say Shavua Yoter Tov. This is Rabbi Felicia Sol. I'm her colleague, Rabbi Roly Matalon. We're rabbis here at Bnei Jeshurun, and we're very honored to welcome everyone here this morning to the Smol Emuni conference. There's a lot of alignment between Smol Emuni and BJ, and we are really, really honored to have you here at a time of such chaotic times, and at a time when Torah and Jewish values are used to justify terrible things. It's good to have all the presentations and the messages we're going to hear today. And I just want to say a big yashar koach to Esther and to Rachel and to all the people who collaborated to make this conference possible.
I was going to say that too, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of gratitude throughout the day for what you've accomplished in a very short amount of time to bring such a movement together in this city that began in Israel but has blossomed here with such vigor. So thank you. We're also obviously beyond chaotic times. We're at war, and there were missiles flying just a couple of hours ago, red sirens alerts. And so I think, and we also know who wasn't able to come because of the war. And so we're holding in our hearts all those who are affected in Israel and Palestine, in Iran, in the surrounding countries in the Middle East who are under fire and worried and not sure what the next period will look like. And we're holding our breaths, praying that this war will come to an end with some kind of resolution that will bring more stability and more peace, although obviously those questions don't feel guaranteed. So before the conference begins, we'll say a prayer for peace with the hopes that the prayer will become a reality soon and in our days.
So those who are able, we invite you to rise. יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו, ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, שתבטל מלחמות ושפיכות דמים מן העולם, ותשכין שלום בעולם, ולא יישא גוי אל גוי חרב, ולא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. יכירו וידעו כל יושבי תבל, שלא באנו לעולם בשביל ריב ומחלוקות, ולא בשביל שנאה וקנאה וקנטור ושפיכות דמים. רק באנו לעולם כדי להכיר אותך, תתברך לנצח. ובכן תרחם עלינו, ויקוים בנו מקרא שכתוב, ונתתי שלום בארץ, ושכבתם ואין מחריד. והשבעתי חיה רעה מן הארץ, וחרב לא תעבור בארצכם. ויגאל כמים משפט, וצדקה כנחל איתן. כי מלאה הארץ דעה את אדוני, כמים לים מכסים.
May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world. The nation will not threaten nation, and the human family will not again know war. For all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love. Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion. Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture, I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down and no one shall terrify you. I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and it shall not be ravaged by war. Let justice and righteousness flow like a mighty stream. Let God's peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say, Amen.
A heartfelt thank you to Rabbi Matalon and Rabbi Sol for your words and for your prayer for peace, and really for welcoming us back into this beautiful sanctuary for our second annual Smol Emuni US conference. Welcome. So my name is Rachel Landsberg. I'm a co-founder and organizer with Smol Emuni US, and if this is your first event ever with us, we really welcome you to join us and have you here with us today. I'm really grateful to be here today in community with each of you, more than 400 scheduled to be here with us in person, hundreds more joining us by live stream from all over the world. Thank you for joining us by live stream. We're here today to do what we do at all of our Smol Emuni US events. We're here to listen, to reflect, to face truths that challenge us, to center the values and Torah that we hold dear, and to embolden ourselves toward action. When we planned this conference, we did not know what would unfold in the week leading up to it. And here we are, once again, in a moment of crisis. I want to name the fear and uncertainty that I am feeling right now, and that many Jews across the world are feeling. And it's a familiar feeling. At the same time, I want to note that many people are living with fear right now. Some who are present in my mind: we American and diaspora Jews, Israeli Jews, Palestinians, Iranians, closer back to home, immigrants and those seeking refuge here in the United States, and there are many, many more. Because of the current situation, 6 of our scheduled speakers from Israel and Palestine are unable to be with us in person today, and their absence is deeply, deeply felt. We're very thankful that 3 of them will join us virtually: Rabbi Michael Manikin, founder of Smol Emuni in Israel; Limor Yaakov Safrai, also from Smol Emuni; and Knesset member Gilad Kariv. We will miss the voices of the others who had hoped to join us in person: B'nai Abraham activist Efrat Rubinoff, Palestinian journalist Jackie Khoury, and Rabbi Zach Truboff. I want to also thank our speakers and moderators, especially those who stepped in at the last moment to be with us today. So over the course of the conference, you'll hear from Jewish Israelis, you'll hear American Jewish voices, and you'll hear Palestinian voices. And some among us are observing the fast of Ramadan, and we want to extend our warm wishes of Ramadan Kareem. We believe deeply in the importance of all of these voices in conversation with each other, The only path forward is one we build together. Thank you to our conference supporters, including the New Israel Fund, and to our individual donors. You have really put your faith in our work, and we appreciate that. We appreciate you. Okay, a few words about the day. Even amidst any fear or uncertainty you may be feeling now, we ask you to join us full-heartedly as we turn to the essential work of today's conference. This year, we chose a verse from Tehillim, chapter 34, to help guide and frame our conference. In this psalm of thanksgiving, Melech David, King David, describes a path for ha'ish hechafetz chaim, for the person who desires life. He advises, Sor mera v'aseh tov, swerve from evil and do good, bakesh shalom v'radfehu, seek peace and pursue it. Before we can pursue the good, we must first be willing to turn away from evil, to see it clearly and confront it honestly. That is the work of our morning plenary. To do that, we must look squarely at the reality unfolding in Israel and Palestine with honesty, integrity, and humility. Violence continues to devastate Palestinian life in Gaza, the West Bank, and within Israel. In Gaza, following Israel's attacks, 98% of the population has been displaced. Over 1 million people remain without adequate shelter. Basic conditions of water, sanitation, and medical care are collapsing. Only a handful of hospitals are still functioning, and Israel does not allow thousands of children who need urgent or life-saving treatment to access it. Israel continues to bar journalists from entering Gaza. Doctors and humanitarian workers who speak publicly about what they witness risk losing access to the very people they are trying to help. In the West Bank, the situation has also deteriorated sharply. There are near constant military raids, expanding checkpoints and closures, deadly violence, and the displacement of tens of thousands of Palestinians from their homes. There are attacks and killings by settlers, demolitions, near complete blocking of movement between villages, towns, and cities. And on top of this ongoing situation, a war is now being waged by the US, Israel, Iran, and others that is devastating lives across the region. If we take the words of Psalm 34 seriously, we cannot look away. We must call out the suffering, the destruction, and the structures of injustice. We must grapple with our own accountability, and we must ask, what are our moral responsibilities as Jews shaped by Torah, and as Americans whose government and institutions play a role in this reality? In our afternoon plenary, we will focus on Aseh Tov, the command to do good. Having faced difficult truths in the morning, we will ask what it means to respond with courage, responsibility, and hope. What can we do to stop the destruction and violence that continue to unfold? How can we help dismantle structures of oppression? What are the pathways for repair and for return? What does it mean for us to act faithfully in this moment? How can we move forward together? In between our two plenaries, we will have lunch, breakout sessions, an afternoon break, and mincha, and I'll share more about that at the very end of the morning plenary. But one of our goals today is to create opportunity for connection and reflection. We hope our smaller breakout groups, as well as lunch and other transition times, will allow for conversations and meaningful interchanges with each other, to help us notice that we're not alone, to share openly and honestly what we are feeling, our fears, our disappointments, our concerns, where our hope still lives. We also recognize and celebrate the diversity of opinions within this space. We want all of you here with us. We ask that in the safety of this community, that each of us open up our hearts and minds today to new perspectives that may be challenging. We think that is essential in order to pave a path forward. Returning to the verse that frames our gathering today, the second half of the pasuk asks of us, Bakesh shalom v'radfehu. Seek peace and pursue it. Our commentators notice repetition in the second half of the verse. Why does it both say Bakesh shalom, seek peace, v'radfehu, and pursue it? Radak suggests that this first phrase, Bakesh shalom, is bepeh, with our mouths. We should seek peace in the way we speak and in how we communicate our hopes and our dreams. We should talk about peace. And v'radfehu, to pursue it, is belev. It's in our hearts. It is not enough to speak about peace. We must feel it deeply in our hearts. We must embody the mindset and disposition of peace, and we must believe it is possible. Rashi offers a different understanding. Bakesh shalom bimkomcha. Seek peace in your own place. V'radfehu b'makom acher. Pursue it in another place, elsewhere. Peace building is an active endeavor. We begin in our own place, bringing peace and building bridges wherever we are, but we do not stop there. We chase it. We work for it. We seek to bring it to every place that needs it. This verse in Tehillim reminds us of our aspirations, of who we as Jews are called to be, even when we fall short. We are people who desire life for ourselves and for others, a people who can turn away from evil, a people who can do good, a people who pursue peace. In order to reach for those aspirations, let us today face hard truths and try to understand what has gone awry. Let us look at our role in it and the role of governments and institutions we have supported. Let us commit to next steps to halt the violence and injustice now unfolding, to move toward repair, and ultimately to build a world in which peace can truly take root. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining with us to do that today. Now please join me in watching a short video that shares a bit more about Smol Emuni US, who we are, our story, the work that we are building and doing together. And after that, we'll move directly into our morning plenary, witnessing the devastation of Gaza. Thank you. Smol Emuni US is a group of observant and Orthodox Jews really building a community and a movement of people here in the US. Our starting point is love and connection for the people and the land of Israel. And from that place, we have serious questions and concerns about things that are happening in Israel, what was happening in Gaza, what was happening in the West Bank.
If the state of Israel doesn't live up to Jewish ethics, people will reinterpret Jewish history in a whole different light.
Halacha's power comes from its ability to meet real issues in the world. Halacha ought to be able to rise to this challenge. Why then has it fallen short?
Certainly part of Zionism is to eliminate the notion of Jews being powerless, but that doesn't mean we worship power.
We wanted to promote a Judaism that is rooted in Torah and believes in equality, freedom, and dignity for all people, both in Israel, in Palestine, and in the United States.
I've been looking for a space as a young Jew to not shy away from hard conversations, but really to lean in and engage with building shared society for Israelis and Palestinians.
For me, Smol Emuni has been kind of a lifesaver. It is the place where I can talk to the people I daven with and daven with the people to whom I talk.
We picked the name Smol Emuni US as an affiliation with the growing religious movement in Israel.
We wanted to make it clear that when we fight for equality or for peace, we are doing this from a place of love and a place of connection, that any criticism is there in order to promote a better future. We've only been around for a year, but we've already made a huge impact. The This is our second year organizing a big conference. Our first one had over 400 people and was sold out within a week, with hundreds more online.
We created salon gatherings where people could be in community and could listen to voices that we were not hearing in our mainstream organizations.
Peace is possible, but only if we dare to take that first step.
Between the lesser and the bigger evil, choose neither. Between hope and despair, choose hope.
What Smol Emuni is going to insist is that we not remain segregated, but that we bring that back to our own communities.
We've been included in multiple events in the wider Jewish community. For Slichot, we had a talk with Rabbi Chaim Seidler-Feller. We have now over 5,000 members. We have a cohort of 30 Orthodox rabbis that meets once a month, learning Torah and discussing challenging situations in their congregation.
We created an educators cohort, giving educators an opportunity to be in conversation and community around how to help students find their voice and how to talk about the conflict and about history with nuance and complexity.
Smol Emuni to me has been a refuge. It has been this place where I can feel effective, where I can feel like I'm doing some small thing to move us forward.
We have a fellowship for 18 gap year students spending the year in Israel.
This year we've really enjoyed getting to know the political context of the place we're living in and supplementing our Torah study with political knowledge and also Be'u Josh.
Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers, instructs us to be disciples of the high priest Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace.
My commitment to my faith and commitment to my progressive values really go hand in hand. To be one is impossible without being the other.
The center starting point of the Smol Emuni is to reclaim a Jewish ethic rooted in Mahu Rachum Afatah Rachum. Just as he is merciful, so too should you be merciful.
And we need to put forward the voices of Torah with compassion and love and justice.
Be a connected critic, engage in conversation, think about learning from Israeli scholars, Palestinian scholars. This is not a time to count yourself out, but really engage in difficult conversations.
If that's something that you have felt you haven't been able to do because you've been kind of pushed into one corner or another, I think you'll find that Smol Emuni is a very appropriate place for you to sit.
The impact of our work is evidence that this voice has been missing in the Jewish community. If you share our values, if you've been looking for a Judaism that is compassionate, join our movement.
Shavua Tov, Ramadan Mubarak. Welcome everybody. My name is David Myers. I teach Jewish history at UCLA and I am a proud member, thank you Chaim, of Smol Emuni. I just want to say what an extraordinary pleasure and privilege it is to be with you all, but especially with my dear friends Rachel and Esther, who have done heroic work in bringing us together and making this possible. Thank you so much. So we gather for the second time in the short history of Smol Emuni US. We draw inspiration from the work of our dear friends in Israel, who since February 2023 have been joined together under a very different name. In Israel, they are Smol Emuni, with the definite article. Here we're Smol Emuni, without the definite article. I'm not sure what the cosmic significance of that is. Maybe we're less defined, more definite, I don't know, more definitive. But I do want to acknowledge the importance of Smol Emuni, which in the trying conditions of Israel today engages in a remarkable range of consequential activities that belies its actual numbers. They really do extraordinary work, and we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. What first attracted me to Smol Emuni and then to the US-based Smol Emuni was a set of entwined propositions. First, that progressive lefties, whatever imperfect words, this is part of the problem. The translation from Smol Emuni into English is necessarily infelicitous. So bear with me. Progressives of faith, we need not be marginalized, but we can and must recognize that we are not alone and that our voice must be heard in our community with clarity and confidence. And the second proposition that really attracted me, in addition to just being here and being nourished by our shared presence, is that progressives of faith not only have an opportunity to reclaim the ethical dimensions of the Jewish tradition that some dismiss as naive, utopian, or even traitorous, we have an obligation. This is true even especially in the current moment, a moment of genuine mivucha, of perplexity and fear, as Rachel noted, for the broken world we live in. When we first conceived of this opening panel, we planned to devote ourselves to the devastation, the Khurban of Gaza, both the psychic fragility of Israelis after October 7th and the almost unimaginable devastation to Palestinian life and property in Gaza. We had organized the first panel around, as Rachel said, the famous line from Psalms, Sor Mira, turn away from evil. Second panel was devoted to, and will be devoted to, Aseh Tov, the second part, and then of course the third, which Rachel mentioned, Bakesh Shalom B'Radfehu. Since our initial deliberations, the US-Israel war with Iran has started. In the first instance, as you know, it prevented some of our panelists from arriving in person from Israel. We are fortunate that we'll have on this panel technology dependent Rabbi Michael Manikin, known to many of us as a key founder of Smol Emuni. In the second instance, the latest war has created a new set of dynamics and concerns. We have to acknowledge this new reality, the threat that it poses to friends and family in Israel and Palestine, in Iran and Lebanon and other parts of the Middle East, and ultimately to the stability of the world at large. It is indeed a time of mivucha. For me, what hovers over all that we have witnessed in the Khurban of Gaza and in today's unraveling conflict is the question of power. A number of Jewish thinkers, from Leibovich to Hartman, declared that the great moral test of the time was how the experiment with Jewish power and sovereignty in Israel would go. And I think we must pose the question anew and be prepared to answer honestly that it is not going so well. That in the wake of Gaza and the ongoing degradation with the daily lethality imposed on Palestinians in the West Bank, we have to ask, have we become akin to the Eved Ki Mloch, the servant who has come to rule, forgetting the experience of oppression to which our forebears had been subjected? We've so wedded ourselves to the project of Jewish self-empowerment, entwined our religious sensibilities with that project, and now we can see where that reckless intoxication with power can lead. We have to acknowledge that the question of power is not a local one, it's a global one. Indeed, the question about Israel and power has become the question about power in the world, where we see such a quick and instinctual recourse to what was called in late 19th century Germany, Machtpolitik, politics of power, in Russia, in the recent protest in Iran, and surely in Donald Trump's United States. The pendulum that swings from structural restraint, say that was imposed after the Second World War, to the unfettered exertion of power has shifted decisively to the latter side. Some of us here may be pacifists, some of us may be pragmatists, some of us may be real politicians, but all of us need to grapple with the question of power, especially military power that rests on violence and destruction, and how it is deployed today. This is a Jewish and a human question. It's an Israeli and an American question, and together we have to seek answers. Our panel this morning will lay the ground for all of us to address the question of power and how it can become indeed I fear has become the source of evil from which we must turn away. It's an invitation to engage in self-reflection, to undertake a cheshbon hanefesh as a manifestation of our ethical commitment to the world. Admittedly, this cheshbon hanefesh is somewhat off-season. It's not Elul, but we are coming off of Purim last week and our reading of the 9th chapter of the Megillah, and so the question of power is on our minds. So let's now engage it. I'm now going to invite the panelists to join me on the stage, and I will introduce them when they make their way up, in whatever order seems. Thank you. Is Michael with us? Michael is with us, but okay, great. All right, so I'm going to begin by introducing someone who needs no introduction, Esther Sperber, who is the Israeli-American founder of Studio ST Architects and the executive director of Smol Emuni US. Yay. That deserves a second round of applause. Amira Hass is a well-known Israeli journalist who covers Palestinian affairs for Haaretz, who's written many, many important pieces, including last week's piece on that trove of documents that Akevot has now gotten in it, which I recommend to all. Really does extraordinarily courageous and heroic work. I've been a long-time admirer. It's really great to be in conversation with you. Thank you, Amira. Aharon Dardik is an Israeli-American ex-settler, conscientious objector to the Israeli military, and nonviolent activist and student of political science and philosophy at Columbia University. Hey, Aharon. And Gregory Khalil is a Palestinian-American who co-founded and serves as president of Telos, which is a Washington-based nonprofit that equips American leaders and their communities to engage in seemingly intractable conflict, including Israel-Palestine. Welcome, Greg. And last but not least, joining us via Zoom is Rabbi Michael Manikin. That's a new title. He often calls me Rabbi, but he's a real, now sanctioned rabbi, activist, thinker, founder of Smol Emuni, and director of the Lions Fellowship Program. Welcome, Michael, from Jerusalem. Okay, I'm going to now take a seat. Coming, great. So let us, I think Michael will come to you after this first round. We're going to begin by asking everybody just to say a brief word of introduction, but also if you could incorporate into that first response your sense of where we stand today in this very tremulous world. So I think, Esther, why don't we begin with you at the left flank? There's going to be a lot of competition for that spot.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the most lefty here, but for these
Probably
people, I'm
not.
on the right.
Probably not. You and Amira can switch later in the day, maybe. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's really moving to see everyone. My name is Esther Sperber. I was born and raised in Jerusalem. My parents, siblings, nieces and nephews, as well as my daughter, who is spending the year on a gap year in Midrashet Lindenbaum, have been rushing to bomb shelters multiple times a day over this last week. I'm worried for their safety. I'm worried for the safety of everyone else in the region. And I'm also thinking of our American troops, who are not usually my initial association, but who are also out there in harm's way. I love my family deeply. But over the last 3 years, I feel that sometimes I'm living in a different reality from them. I see different news. I'm excited by different Torah. And I'm imagining a very different future. I watch what's happening from afar, and I'm both horrified and pained. Like Rachel and David noted, I see the terrible death toll and devastation in Gaza. People who have lost everything. For them, this war is not at all over. And I see the escalation of the violence in the West Bank, which is not only a structural thing, but also perpetrated by people who claim to be part of my own religious community. Last week, Muhammad Taha Muammar was 52, and his brother, Fahim Taha Muammar, were both shot by settlers. The situation in Israel and the region is dangerous and combustible. But my other very deep, deep concern is not just the danger of war, but its corruption of our faith and our Judaism. There's a horrible new slang in Israel, lizarbev, which means to methodically and joyfully destroy Gaza. It comes from the name of Rav Zarbiv, who bragged on viral social media posts about his demolition techniques in Gaza. He boasted that they, the Gazans, will have nothing to come back to, not even a family photo. Our tradition has been hijacked by those who speak this language of revenge and Jewish supremacy. Where is our Torah? The one that proclaims, beloved is human being who was created by God's image, in God's image. The Torah that demands, do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God, the motto of our first conference. And what is our role as religious observant Jews in the face of these voices, which claim to represent authentic Judaism? Our tradition is ancient, and it includes many voices, including those types of racist, misogynist, vengeful voices. But there are many, many, many other voices hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to embrace them and amplify them and use them to express ourselves. In Bereshit, the book of Genesis, Yaakov prepares for a potential conflict, perhaps a war, with his brother Esav, after years of exile and estrangement. The pasuk says, Vayira Yaakov vayitzer lo. And Jacob was scared, and he was, and here we can debate the translation of vayitzer, either anxious, like mitzar, or sorry, like tsar. Rashi, the 11th century commentators, is concerned about this repetition. Why does it have to say vayitzer and vayira? As often, we try to explain these repetitions in explaining that one of these is different than the other. And Rashi says, vayira shema yaharog. Yaakov was worried, he was anxious that he might kill someone. Sorry, vayira shema yahareg. He might be killed. Vayitzer lo, and he was sorry or he was anxious. Im yaharoghu acherim. He was concerned that he might be the one killing others. This Torah speaks to me at this time. War at times may be necessary. But like Yaakov, we must worry not only that we might be killed, but also that we may kill others, especially those who are innocent. We need this kind of Torah. We need a community that can share this kind of Torah. And together, the community and its intellectual Torah project can shift the moral political landscape in the Jewish world and wider.
Thank you, Esther. Okay, Amira, tell us where you're coming from to make your way here today and where you see things at this current moment.
First, thank you for inviting me, even though the circumstances are deplorable and the reasons that we have to be here instead of others who were caught up in between the sea and the river could not come for the wrong reasons. I am, in echoing you, I'm a furious leftist, atheist Jew born accidentally in Israel. And this accidentally is accompanying me all the time. I was lucky to be able to manifest or to experience and to live my political beliefs and convictions through my work and living in Gaza and the West Bank for the past 35 years. And Gaza, in a way, in Gaza, I became, when I moved to Gaza or when I started going to Gaza in the early 90s, I became attached to the country, as the landscape, as the colors and the light, more than I imagined, because I usually saw myself as, because I was accidentally born, I was always drawn to the diaspora. I wanted to go back to the diaspora that my parents had to leave after the Holocaust. And Gaza is so dear to me, so you can imagine how the destruction that we, Israel, is inflicting on Gaza, how painful it is for me, and it's something that I experience, and it is for me Shoah. It is for me the Shoah as my parents experienced their Shoah, my mother in Bergen-Belsen, my father in a ghetto. I come from a communist family, so communist and Jewish meant that what divides us, or what unites us with people, is the pursuit for justice and the repulsion towards power and oppression and repression, and that the division lines are not between religions or ethnicities, but between the oppressor and the oppressed. We are with the oppressed. You know what I've been following, I know Michael since he was, before he was a rabbi, and before he was a father.
That was 2 weeks ago, so you
Yes.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, so before he was a father, and I really admire, I really feel very close to his way and to his way of explaining and to his thoughts. And he knows, as somebody who was in Breaking the Silence, the disaster in which we live and which we Israel create every day is not something of the last 3 years. It did not start in October, in the 7th of October. It has taken many years. And what really drives me, what really makes me very furious for the past 35 years, and people who know me know that I never tire of being furious, is that with the Oslo Accords, the Palestinians gave us, not only Israel, but also the Jews outside of Israel, a very generous present. They say, okay, for us, we care for all of Palestine. For us, all of Palestine is our homeland. But we are ready, for the sake of a sane future, a sane path towards better life for both peoples, we agree to settle and to have a state in 22% of the land. Just let us be and have this state. And Israel, with the Oslo Accords and under the guise of a peace process, insisted on proving that what Palestinians have said for many years before, and all kinds of radical leftists have said for 50, 60, 70 years, insisted to prove that they are right. What? That we are a settler colonial entity, that we care for the land, for the grab of the land, and for the expulsion of the Palestinians from their communities, from their houses, from their land, more than we care about the future of our own grandchildren, not just the Palestinian grandchildren. And this is something that I'm talking and I'm polite, but I'm furious.
Okay. We get that. It's coming through. Good. Okay, Greg, if you would just say a word of introduction, what brought you here and where you think we are today.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm honestly never at a loss of words, but there's so many thoughts going through my head listening to all of you. And so if I may, I want to be extremely vulnerable and open with all of you today. And I know that I'm going to say things and use words that may be really challenging to many of you in this room. My purpose is not to be provocative. Instead, I deeply believe that as fraught as this current moment is, our realities and our futures are deeply intertwined. Even if we don't like that, there's no good future for any Israeli-Palestinian, one-state, two-state, six-state solutions without a good reality, human rights for everyone, and particularly post-Holocaust and post-Nakba, which are not opposing narratives. We can get more into this. We Jews and Palestinians are stuck as these minorities together, whether we like it or not. And right now, most people, I think at least in my communities, don't like and cannot name that reality. I felt the need to state that up front because what brings me here today is a sense of deep urgency. It's a sense of deep grief and anger and horror, and a sense that the world does not need to be this way. So when I was listening to Rachel this morning, I was reminded of some advice from my father. My dad was born in Beit Sahur outside of Bethlehem in 1927. He was a Palestinian Christian theologian, and he often quoted the psalmist and said that, seek peace and pursue it. But during one of Israel's horrific onslaughts in Gaza, I think this was in 2012 when my mom was dying, we were out to breakfast one day and we were talking about all of these dynamics, and I had just been in Gaza on the border and then also in Gaza sometime before that. But he said, look, to seek peace and pursue it, that is always the right thing to do, especially when it seems impossible. And listening to Amira and I, we met, I think, maybe 22 years ago. I'm a former lawyer. I was a negotiator on the I was an advisor to negotiators on the Palestinian negotiating team from 2004 to 2008. An image that haunts me from that time kept coming back into my mind. And so I want to tell a very short story because it answers where I'm at in this moment. I think it was late 2006, 2007. I was walking home from work in the middle of Ramallah, and there's the Menara, the central square there. And two men stopped me, one wearing a red t-shirt. Didn't know them. They knew who I was, though, because I'd worked on the negotiating team, and back in 2004, you may remember the court case, the International Court of Justice, where Palestinians took Israel's construction of a wall, security barrier, the apartheid wall, to the International Court of Justice. I was part of that team. We went there. We won. I wrote an op-ed for the Palestinian leadership. Nobody wanted to sign off on it because it was considered provocative, so it went out in my name, and then it was translated into Arabic. And so people kind of knew what I did for a living, and I was very positive about the opinion. I said, look, this is something that affirms international law. It says, at that time, we're working for a two-state solution. I'm not sure it's helpful to even talk about that at this stage anymore, but it was like, look, this references international law. It's not another hot air resolution. This is something that says, look, Israel has a right, like every nation, to protect itself, just as Palestinians have a right to protect themselves, our right to self-defense, our right to resist injustice. The question isn't whether, it's how, and this could provide a framework for Israelis and Palestinians to actually meaningfully change their lives. So I'm going off on this, he asks me, this guy in the red shirt, like, what about this opinion? And I go off on some of my Pollyannish talking points, but then I say, but look, of course, the wall keeps going up, not on the Green Line, but often 45% into the West Bank, wrapping around these villages and these towns, destroying Palestinian communities, and the settlements are expanding at their fastest rate in history. And so he stops me in this moment, and I never forget it. Because he's like, wait, when will you ever understand? These things that you call languages of law and justice, they don't apply to us. The only time that people see us is when we make noise. And I knew exactly what he was saying because it ran counter to my moral convictions against targeting civilian life, which is not just illegal without justification under international law, but it's a moral aberration. And yet in that moment, this was 2007, I did not know what to say. Because we go to court, we get a judgment, we get a clear ruling. Whatever we do as Palestinians, we are never human. There's no path, violent or nonviolent, to redress the fundamental injustice that we experience of having our humanity only being conditional, never allowed agency in our homes to want to return to the homes that we have keys for, that we were kicked out of and called were anti-Semitic, just for that simple desire to return to our actual homes, to the lands where we exist for generations. And so I didn't know what to say because my talking points would not work to him, but I've thought of him every day on October 7th and since. Because how do we respond in a situation? He's right, maybe. Maybe he was right. That's what we see now for the first time in my life as a middle-aged man. When I say I'm Palestinian, people don't shrink away. They know something about the story. They may not know the real story. There's a difference now. And so layering all of this onto the horror that the pogroms continue, 3 people, Palestinians, killed in the West Bank yesterday, executed by settlers, and the Israeli army came to protect the settlers who executed them, not the Palestinians living under a horrific reality that even Israeli human rights organizations have called apartheid for a decade, right? In Gaza, we'll talk more about the devastation in Gaza. I'm not even from Gaza. My grandmother was from Gaza. Her church was bombed 2 weeks in. 11 members of her family whom I did not know killed, slaughtered. And we're talking about this horrific devastation, but no one here on the panel who can actually speak to that. And so I'm left with this seek peace and pursue it, especially when it seems impossible. Right now it feels impossible. My last short word, though, is I also have this deep conviction that I don't know what to do with. And that is that despite all available evidence today, the world does not need to be this way. There can be another way forward, but only if we find that conviction to actually see the world as it is and our species as it is, not as we want it to be, and to take consequential action today, not just to kick this down to future generations and how can we prevent these horrors. Never again. Never again is always ever again unless we show up in the moment, right? And this is this moment. And that, to me, is a bit of an article of faith. I don't know what to do with it, but that's why I'm here, because I think there's a moral imperative.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, Aharon, tell us what brings you here today and where you think we're at. You have a particular role as a member of a younger generation than other panelists, not to place too much of a responsibility upon you. We know you're not speaking for the entirety of your generation, but we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. First off, my heart right now is with my family back in the land. It was my younger brother's bar mitzvah, the day that the war was started by Israel and the United States, and as a result, the celebration that was planned was one that was done in between visits to the bomb shelter. My heart is with the civilians, especially the elementary school girls in Iran, who were brutally killed for no apparent reason by Israel and the United States. And my heart is with the people here in the United States who are being targeted by the same administration, especially my classmate Mahmoud Khalil, whose abduction was 1 year ago tomorrow. I'm very much the youngest person on this panel. And even I feel like I have a memory of a time where the world was not quite like this, where despite having our issues, having our problems, there was more of an effort, or at least a facade, of trying to reach a level of peace and harmony through cooperation, through diplomacy, and through various other means aside from naked power. And in many ways, I feel like this has been the struggle that, at least in sort of the European West and the United States, etc., we have been trying to grapple with, which is how much do we believe that power provides people ability and nothing else, that the strong will do what they want and the weak will suffer what they must. And that's a question that I think we're taking now into our lives and our world, and at least for me, I'm looking at a world that is looking much more different from what I thought I was, like as a kid, I was growing up into. And I think also that the Jewish people have a very interesting role in that question. We have, for the longest time, been not explicitly part of this sort of European Western project, marginalized from it, but existing alongside it in conversation with it. And it's really only recently that we've seen, through both like the past 200 years with Zionism and with Theodor Herzl, saying, hey, we could adopt this project for ourselves. We could become a European nation in the land of Israel. We can engage in nationalism like they do. We can become powerful like they are, and work with them, work with eventually the United States and others to become just like them. And at least for me, I think it's really important to recognize that that is a new idea in response to what we as Jews have been doing for much, much longer, which is to see that power for us comes not as something to pursue in and of itself, but as something achieved through cooperation, through, in some ways, vulnerability. And that the distinction for us between those two is so thin that the mythical, legendary zenith of our strength as Jewish people under Shlomo Melech, under King Solomon, comes at a time where we've basically created peace treaties with every other nation in the area, and we are relied upon for our wisdom and for being sort of this crossroads between many other great civilizations, and that is how we prosper. And with that as sort of a contrast to what we're seeing today, I think that we as Jews have a lot of space to go to return to that sort of ideal, and that in our involvement both with sort of the project of Israel and how Jewry works in the United States and across the world, I'm thinking a lot about what it means to be a person who is not just sort of speaking about cooperation and peace and bridge building, all of these things, but what it means to actually go on the ground and do that. What does it look like when these words, which feel really nice to say right here in front of all of you, become words that I want to put into practice on streets with real people who are not going to be perfect partners at all times, who are not going to make it the easiest thing possible, who are not variables in theoretical physics, but have all of their various flaws and difficulties. And for me, that means that we, and it's also like both my generation and everyone else, need to mature a lot and reach a level of understanding that real strength comes not from the ability to inflict harm on others, but to be tough and sustain it on ourselves and say, hey, this is going to be hard and we're going to do it anyway. And for me, when it comes to organizing with the current left, when it comes to trying to find a way forward, and speaking to people in my community who are far to my right, this is a process that is hard. It is a process that I think requires pragmatism, but it's only a process that is worth doing. And I think that we have no other option, and that, like, for me, I'm thinking a lot about what it means to be post to everything and still trying to move forward.
Thank you, Aharon. Okay, we're going to make our way to Michael and ask you, Michael, to explain where you're coming to at this moment, where you're coming from at this moment, sorry, and where you think we are at in this most dangerous of times. The floor is yours. We don't yet hear. Hold on one second. Yeah. Okay, try it one more time. Nope. Keep talking. No. Oh, maybe.
Just be fully transparent, the internet was down in the entire building earlier today, so that was the main thing we were working on. I loved the, whoa, that happened, made me feel much better. So, stand by. I don't know, maybe. Just want to double check on your end. Are you unmuted, just to really make sure that we've, I'm sure that you are, but I'm just double checking.
Should we unmute? Would it help if we unmuted? No.
It's run through a whole situation. Yes, I know you're seeing on here that those are off, but it's not coming through here. So.
I got it.
We're checking on it. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, so you're working on that? Okay, so we're going to continue the conversation. Michael, we are going to come back to you and accord you the requisite amount of time that you deserve. And this question is indeed one that I want you to take up, so you have a little bit of time to meditate upon it. But what I want to ask, because I think it's really of the essence to what brings us here, is what the state of Judaism is in this day. I tend to think that the paradigm of Jewish identity that has been operative in the lives of so many Jews in Israel and abroad has been marked by the entwinement of the national or political and the religious. Sort of celebration, veneration of the Israel state project, but wrapped in sort of the symbols and concepts of Jewish tradition, something about which very prescient thinkers warned very early on. And that one of the things that occurred after October 7th was, and the 2 years of relentless daily assault was really the shattering of that paradigm of Jewish identity, such that we're left without a sense of moral compass or of what the indeed ethical foundations of Jewish tradition and our identity actually are. And I'm wondering, maybe we'll begin with Esther, what your sense is of where we stand in this current moment from the perspective of a Jew of faith who believes deeply in sort of the spiritual grandeur of Judaism. Where do you think we are at in this current moment? What is the state of Judaism? what is the, and what do you think we need to do to really stitch together, or in the words of the Kabbalists, bring together those fragments of one's whole entity that have been shattered so violently?
That's an easy question. Yeah, what's the state of Judaism?
After the Churban of Gaza, that's really the question.
I think we're not, for me at least, I'm not yet in a moment where I can really reflect on a state. I think we're still in this real moment of turmoil and confusion and uncertainty and fear and fury, as Amira said, and disgust. What I've been thinking about a lot is the kind of relationship of world Jewry and Israeli Jews. And this is not exactly the answer to your question, but it is something that's been troubling me. As someone who grew up in Israel, you grew up with this sense that we're not only better than the Palestinians, we're also kind of better than diaspora Jews. You know, we're stronger, we're smarter, we're more courageous, we're more interesting, we can backpack better, we can, all kinds of things. And having now lived half of my life here, I think there's one of the things we are called upon to do as American Jews and world Jews is to think a little bit about the strengths and convictions and moral centers that we have now and that we have tried to develop over kind of the project of modernity and emancipation. And things that have kept us safe are things like human rights and civil rights and international law. They were typically not fighter jets and tanks. And I think that we need to find some kind of new balance in which we can speak up more proudly as people who have lived as minorities in other cultures and speak up about what makes these types of societies flourish, not only for the minorities, but also for the majority. And I think that's something that somehow we have shied away from, and even more so, I feel, in the last few years, in the last 3 years, where things that the Israeli government does are clearly at times endangering us, inviting right-wing extremists to the Knesset, while the countries in which they're politicians, the Jews over there protest it. I feel like maybe one of the other ways that may help us move forward is not only Jews, Israelis, and Palestinians having kind of more respect and listening to each other and working together, but also a kind of diaspora Jewish world working with more courage and confidence with Israeli Jews on this project.
Great. So I think we're going to use this opportunity to move to our Israeli Jewish panelists. Michal, you're with us?
Can you hear me now? Is this okay? Yeah, everybody's going like this. Okay, so I can't hear you now, but I guess that's okay. I'm also incredibly conscious about how large my head is to you guys as I'm looking at my video. But I will say some thoughts, if that's okay. First, this is obviously not how I imagined speaking. Here, I was so looking forward to being in the Smol Emuni US conference. It's such an important sort of moment. And obviously the flight last night was canceled. I do want to allow myself to say that it's not been an easy couple of weeks here. Around 2 hours ago, there was a siren, so I wasn't even sure I was going to be on. There were 2 soldiers killed last night. There was somebody wounded, probably seriously from shrapnel from one of the bombs a couple of hours ago. There's a genuinely frightening sort of experience here over the last week. And that goes to the sort of more also general frustration of just not having a general schedule or waking up a couple times in the middle of the night. And of course, this is after 3 years of general anxiety. So I want to bring that into the room. I know it's been brought all together, but it was sort of important to me to add. Obviously, from an activist perspective, the Smol Emuni in Israel, we're not focused only on ourselves and our sort of what we're going through, but we have a lot of thoughts about how to act as activists at this time. And it's also important to bring into the room that it's generally a hard time for activists now in Israel, especially I'm thinking about folks like Emuni US, which is our activist group, and Smol Emuni working, doing protective presence in the territories. And it was mentioned before that 3 Palestinians were killed in the last week. While obviously one can't compare the violence towards Palestinians, the violence towards Israeli activists who are there to try to de-escalate the situation is much more challenging for activists in the past. And I know a lot of the thought was given up until now to Gaza and to what's happening in the occupied territories. But I will say regarding the Iran issue, which was the initial question, that it's incredibly frustrating, and also that I don't have any real sort of takes to offer. The regional war is being conducted in calculations that I don't necessarily understand and under moral guidelines that I don't recognize. A friend of mine who's also a Smol Emuni activist, Gabriel Ben Sur, he's currently editing a book for Makom, which is a publishing house of Smol Emuni, on Rabbi Ben Moseg's writings. Told me a couple of months ago, or reminded me a couple of months ago, that in classical Jewish prayers, we would pray for the governing powers under who we lived, often out of fear, and it's only in modern times that we replace a stance with somebody else, with something else. Instead of praying for the well-being of the political order, we began to identify ourselves with the order itself. So France and then the United States, Israel, of course, our hopes and anxieties and sense of identity became tied to the fate of our governments. I think perhaps these times, and this relates to a lot of what was said on the panel, sort of forces us to rediscover our older humility, to recognize that history is larger than our ability to manage it, that power has its own logic. I don't think in this context Jewish power is any different than other power. Kings will always be kings, wars will always be wars, interests will always be interests, and I think that what that does is it raises a deeper question, which is, what is the role of people such as ourselves to remain responsible to the world around us? How do we make sure that that helplessness in light of these last 3 years doesn't turn into disengagement or irresponsibility? I can share that at least for us in the Smol Emuni, it's really been more about just growing and building and engaging what we believe in. And what we've been trying to do over the last couple of years is exactly that. So really trying to become an ecosystem of initiatives that have different religious action. So we have an organization called Asadeh, which does now educational work and builds works with hundreds of educators. I mentioned Bnei Avraham, which does work with Palestinian partners to resist land dispossession. I mentioned the publishing house, which has put out already 4 books, working on its 5th, and it's coming up with a Jewish journal, hopefully to be in Hebrew and English in 2 months, and the Midrashah, which is a political Beit Midrash for young adults. The reason I'm mentioning it is because when thinking about remarks for this panel and sort of how do we deal with the situation and what I'm coming with to this conversation, I thought about the opening of Mesilat Yesharim, where the Ramchal writes that when a person behaves or performs a mitzvah properly, even for a brief moment, they can sometimes feel me'ein olam haba, or a small glimpse of the world to come, and maybe that's our work right now. So maybe it's not to control history or to have strong takes about how things can be solved, but rather to build moments and movements in which the world can briefly resemble the one we believe and what it can become. I don't think, like Esther said, I don't think it's an Israeli project. I think it involves the past and present and future of the Jewish people as a whole. So the idea of building institutions, learning Torah, and acting and in the world together is really part of, I think, what needs to be done. And that needs to be done is not necessarily the same language as how do we win the next election. That's not to say that that's, not necessarily important. Of course, all political action is incremental and crucial in the same way, but I think sort of, at least for the focus for us, has increasingly been how do we just create our presence in a way which can allow for growth both in the short term and in the long run.
Michael, can you hear me?
And to hope for days where that becomes perhaps more relevant or more effective. And while I know that answer is very frustrating for people who, like myself, grew up in sort of activism, where then there's always sort of hope that you can you hear?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to follow up on that and really push a little bit further, because you operate in a world in which there is so much blindness around you to certainly the work you do, but really the work to the phenomena that your work tries to prevent, to what goes on in the West Bank, to what goes on in Gaza. There's so much blindness. There's so much kind of inability to acknowledge what is being done that is so deleterious to the Palestinian population in our midst. And I wonder, in a sense, I guess there are two questions. One, how do you understand the aggregate effect of the work of all the units you've mentioned, B'nai Abraham, Masadeh, and as part of an effective theory of change? Like, what are you seeing in the midst of this darkness and blindness? What are you seeing? And I guess ultimately what enables you to get up in the morning and continue to do the work? Because I'm sure you can, you're surrounded by your chevre, and you see enormous activity and goodwill and sort of the best values that you can imagine. And yet you're someone who's not content just to rest, within that little bubble. So if you could move us a little bit further in your thinking about what we should be thinking about a theory of change to really affect, not just a good outing for a protective presence, but moving the needle.
I think that's an important question. And I think that's a question which always needs to be asked, and of course one which needs to be tackled from a lot of different directions. And obviously blindness is a phenomenon which is as our Musar teachers taught us, blindness is a part of a phenomenon of power, and one can't disconnect those two. And of course blindness is an Israeli phenomenon, but I think it's a phenomenon of anyone in power, of course the US being part of that as well. And then the question is how to challenge it, and there are so many answers to give, so I need to choose one. And I will say something about sort of how we approach it in Smol Emuni. Every generation has its religious lefties. That's, sometimes it's more liberal, sometimes it's more socialist, sometimes it's more ultra-Orthodox, sometimes it's more religious Zionist, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room know how to recognize sort of the history. I think what we haven't done in previous generations is think institutionally and rather thought of our voice as one of conscience and the importance of sort of bringing the religious individual to the protest. I think that's incredibly important. It's definitely been incredibly important for people such as myself in terms of my upbringing. I'm trying to think of sort of like the many teachers that my parents brought into our home, either through books or not only. But when I think about schools and when I think about larger systems and even about the idea of working with government in the long run, it's something that religious lefties have just not necessarily focused on. Now, I'm not naive. I recognize that the role of these types of politics is sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. But I think the avodah sviv hashulchan, or the work around the table, is to think not only is the experience that we're experiencing today of hundreds of traditional Jews sitting and talking about sort of crucial issues in the land of Israel, Palestine, is this only important symbolically, or can we do with this something politically and institutionally? And I think what I'm trying to think of increasingly is that question. Definitely the folks in Smol Emuni are thinking about that. I will say from my personal perspective, but I know this is true to people sitting in your room as well right now, so much of my life I've dedicated to working outside of my community. And only since the Smol Emuni started have I been able to sort of think seriously about my children's education. And I think those types of issues are things that we can improve at. And so that's one answer. And the second thing I would say is that the question of Israel is a theological question. And it requires a theological answer. And here I'm also pointing to a good friend of mine and teacher of mine and yours, David, as well, Amnon Razkar-Kotzkin, or Nono, who constantly reminds me that the question of Jews in Israel is a question of theology as well. And the role of the people in this room is to provide serious theological answers to that question.
Okay.
And maybe I'll...
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna pause one second so we can hear from some other voices at that really important juncture. Amira, is the problem that you write about every day, which it's not clear to me how you get up every day and write about what you do every day for 35 years, is it a theological problem?
I don't even understand the word.
Okay.
So for me, the problem is I certainly understand that Israel has hijacked a Judaism. I think there are many Judaisms, not only one. I'm saying it as an observer, not as a participant. So it has hijacked the Judaism that you are belonging to, and you, for sure, or it is claiming to take the one Judaism, or claiming that there is one Judaism and it is the Judaism that Israel represents. So I totally, I really appreciate your political work. You call it, maybe you'll call it theological. I see it as a political work and human work to oppose this usurpation. But for me, the question of Israel, or what I would like to say to you, is that Israel is dangerous to the world. This is a fright. I mean, this combination of words frightens me. I mean, it alarms me, it depresses me deeply. But I don't. There is some mutation that has been happening to the entire people in Israel, the Jewish Israelis, and I can say it only if you think about those 40-50% of the people who have been out in the streets to oppose Netanyahu and to oppose the judicial putsch. So few of them dare to go together with leftist activists to the Jordan Valley, to Masafer Yatta, and to protect them from the pogroms, daily pogroms of the Jewish Ku Klux Klan. I mean, this is...
Okay,
there must be something wrong. There must be something wrong when people who call themselves liberals and opposition and Democrats, must be something wrong that they don't care about it.
Okay, so I have a question as an historian that interests me a lot. It's one I ask myself a lot. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. When did that mutation begin? Is that a 48 question? Is that a 67 question? When did that mutation begin to really develop, in your opinion?
It's a difficult question. I mean, it's before 67. It's probably before 48. It's maybe with the idea of a nation state. But at the same time, I know it from my parents. Jews had no, I mean, the success of the German genocide, it succeeded, made most of the Jews support Zionism. Before Hitler, the minority of Jews thought of Zionism as a solution to the problem of anti-Semitism. And so I can say, yes, okay, I can say with Zionism. But I also know that Zionism, or the establishment of the State of Israel, that Zionism was pushing for.
What you're also saying, it seems to me, is the Holocaust may have produced some of the conditions of that mutation that you're talking about.
That's the Holocaust created mutation. I mean, the Holocaust represented mutation in European peoples, in Christian people, etc. No, I don't think. I think that the Jews went out of the Holocaust and looked for life, sought life. And there was a contradiction. There was a contradiction between the emancipatory needs of the Jews and the existential needs of the Jews at that time, when the diaspora kicked us out. We are a perfect people to be in the diaspora, but the diaspora kicked us out. So I see history here. I don't see theology where you might see. So I cannot say, it's difficult for me to say, because of course I think that there is a problem with nation states. There is a problem with any purity that any ethnicity is claiming. There is a problem, and it causes all kinds of distortions in the people's body.
Okay.
But I cannot ignore the historical process that brought to the establishment of the State of Israel.
Okay. All right. I want Greg to take a crack at that question. I'm really interested in your perspective, given your own familial roots and the work you do. Do you see the problem at hand as a theological problem?
I mean, that's a semantic question. A couple quick points. One, I think it's important for Palestinians, as much as we're able, to be a part of these conversations, because the negative externality of Zionism is our dispossession, our disenfranchisement, apartheid, and what the entire human rights community labels as an act of genocide. That's important to name. And so we are very much stakeholders in the conversation that you're having here, because it's our lives, our communities that have been devastated, starting with the Nakba that began in 1947 to 1949, which continues until today. It never ended. That needs to be named, and that needs to be seen. And if you feel discomfort in your body when I say these words, I need you, as somebody who says you believe in peace, and I believe that's sincere because you are here, to be able to deeply understand why it is that we experience and see the world in that way. So when you come to the world, is it a theological question? You're partly asking me because a lot of the work I do is with evangelical Christians. And that's work that I've done for 20 years. And I think some of this is semantic, but a land without a people. A land without a people. A land without a people. For a people without a land. That's both a political and a theological statement. And I'm sorry, but it's the first criterion of the crime of genocide. That we are not people. Or that we are lesser beings, children of a lesser God. And so when you ask the question of when did this begin, every Palestinian knows all of these statements. We know the statements from Israeli leaders long before October 8th invoking Amalek and calling us Amalek. We know that, and we hear it, and we've heard consistently, oh, well, those are just a few bad apples. That's the fringe. And then on the other hand, well, there's a few good apples. I went to Yale Law School. I had a couple good Jewish friends afterward, and call me one of the good ones in an email, critically. So there's a few bad apples on your side, a few good apples on ours. I'm reminded of the quote from Solzhenitsyn, a theologian of sorts, a public theologian who was imprisoned, and he said, look, the line between good and evil doesn't run through the sand, but I'm paraphrasing, but through every human heart. And that's kind of the problem that we're in right now, is that we're seeking to own the language of morality, that we are good, that we cannot commit bad. And true empathy is understanding our capacity to both. Each and every one of us as people groups. And so I think it's a little bit of a semantic question about it, but I want to say something that may be a little controversial. And that is, I see, as I'm looking at Ari Goldman here, he's a former professor at Columbia. We taught together for 7 years a course called Covering Religion, so this is a little bit of our topic of course that he founded years ago. But there's two things I want to say, if I might. Well, first is, I think it's important to recognize that Zionism, or Zionisms, very much functions like a religion. And I think that needs to be contended with. Because for many people who ascribe to Zionism, it's not a political ideology like I'm a member of the Democratic Party. It's an article of faith beyond critique. And so there's no reason, and there's ritual, there's identity, there's community. It has all of the features of religion. And so this is something I can say, as a Palestinian who's fundamentally committed to human rights, and I've been consistent for 30 years in my activism and my words, I hope, is that there are conversations which it's like you're talking, I'm speaking to somebody about religion, and yet it's framed as a political discourse, and that's really not what it is. It's a theological discourse.
Now you're getting to the reasons why it's not just a mere semantic distinction. It's actually enormously important to make that point about the theological underpinning, about the enveloping of a political project in sort of the features of the theological that mandate certainty, absoluteness, exclusivity. It's really, I think, of the essence. And I would say, as you continue to convey your message, as effectively as you do, I would think very seriously about considering the theological as something other than sort of mere semantics.
I think that's true, and I might finish. There's a rich conversation to be had another time here. I want to just finish with just sort of a debate that Ari and I have had publicly many times, because Ari, if I might, you still define yourself as a Zionist. And from my perspective, I can understand and empathize deeply with the rationales and embrace the rationales of Zionism, of Jewish liberation, right? This is something that you cannot argue with. But Zionism meant something very different for Martin Buber and Hannah Arendt than it did for David Ben-Gurion, or it does for Benjamin Netanyahu today. There's a Zionism in theory, in aspiration, and there's a Zionism in praxis, theological terms, telos in praxis, what it means in reality. And like every movement, these things evolve. And so in 1948, Zionism necessarily meant the wrongful expulsion of indigenous peoples from their homes and lands. And it was rationalized by saying, you're not really people, you're not really attached, you're modern people. All of these lies about who we are, to say that somehow it was okay, or well, other countries did this and therefore why not us? Like, to rationalize ethnic cleansing and genocide. And then when we get to Gaza today, Zionism today must be critiqued by what it means in the actual world, and we see it. We see it in the destruction of 90% of the homes in Gaza. Every university completely leveled. Almost all of the hospitals inoperable. And millions of people, mostly children, living still today a horror that none of us can imagine. And so I want to say there is a consequence to theology. Theology matters, and it comes if you view Zionism partly as religion. This is the theological consequence, and it's one we must contend with together, especially Palestinians who are still living this horror, and we are in the next phase of a final stage for what some people want, which is this Nakba to be complete and to have the land without us. And that's not good for us. It's not good for the Jewish people. It's not good for Israelis. It's not good for the Middle East. It's not good for the world. There is another way that we must build, but we have to be able to say these things and act on these things if we're ever going to have a chance of getting there.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, Aharon, we're going to give you an opportunity to offer your thoughts, and then we're going to open up to questions from the audience. So please. Too much has been left unsaid and unasked, but we'll integrate the questions from the audience into further conversation. So go ahead.
Yeah, in addition to agreeing with what everyone else has already said, I just want to offer a short anecdote about a game that I'd play with some of my friends in the Jewish community at Columbia, and I'm going to use a pseudonym instead of his real name. But the question was, is Larry the last liberal Zionist at Columbia? This was a person who had served as Jeshurun co-president with me at one point, and then went off to join the Peace Corps in Mongolia. And with each, the way the game would be played is that each person would bring up someone and said, "Oh, is this student? Is this our one of our friends? Someone in our community? Are they really a liberal Zionist?" Right? And then we go, "Oh no, you see, they just happen to be liberal and they're normatively a Zionist, but they don't really care about it." And then we'd move on down the list. "Oh, are they really liberal Zionists?" No, they're not really a liberal Zionist. They're just a right-wing Zionist who, like, is pro-choice, right? And you move on. And you've got some freshmen in the audience. I'm not sure if it's still true. But a lot of what's happening with sort of younger Jews, even Jews who are very tapped into the Jewish community, is that, especially in the past 2 years, this question of Zionism as one of theological importance has been shifting, and that I don't think that it is. I think part of my experience is that even if it is a question that is theological for so many, that it doesn't have to be, and that it wasn't before, and it's ceasing to be, I think, in the future. And people are now sorting themselves into saying, okay, this actually is of essential importance, not just that I am a Zionist, but that I am supportive of the Israeli military or the Israeli government. And on the other hand, saying, actually, no, my Judaism means more than this, and it means that I'm going to be pursuing all sorts of various things that are much more valuable to me, much more important to me. And as a result, Zionism is decentered, and these questions around Israel are really not a part of the theological conversation.
Right. I mean, I think this connects to something that I think Esther was talking about in her response a while ago, to what may be an actual political imperative at this point as one of the consequences of the destruction of Gaza, and that is a decentering of the state project as the foundation of our sense of Jewishness, of our the sort of acknowledging, and here's where I think the theological is important, the idolatry of the worship of state, and the need to reorient and recalibrate, not to abandon, not to abandon our people and not to abandon our neighbors, but to recalibrate in our sense of Jewishness that veneration of a state project, which is a political entity intended to meet the needs of its people, not to be the messianic fulfillment in and of itself. So that perhaps is part of the work of, I don't know, Esther, if you were thinking of recentering or reimagining the relationship between diaspora Jews and Israeli Jews as part of something other than what it has been, which seemed to, in some sense, crash on the rocks in Gaza. This seems to be a moment to consider that kind of recalibration. But let's maybe now open up and hear from folks in the audience. We'll take a number of questions, and then we'll see where we are. So I see Kathleen right there with her hand up. Seems like a good place to start. I think a microphone is coming your way, so shortly.
Thank you. I'm Kathleen Paratis. I'm co-chair of Jewish Currents. Hi, Greg. I have a quick question for Greg and also one for David. As an I identify as anti-Zionist, but as you labeled Zionists as a religion, it all of a sudden occurred to me, oh my God, is anti-Zionism also a religion? That's a big challenge to me, and I'd like to know. I hope you let me off the hook, but we'll see. And David, I wonder if you would comment on the difference between the anti-Zionism on the left and the anti-Zionism on the right. I think we've done a poor job of distinguishing between the motivations of one and the other. I think a lot of people are confused. You're not confused, so I wonder if you'd do that. Thank you.
Okay. We're going to hold on to that so we can hear some other voices, and then we'll give folks an opportunity to, yes, somewhere, somebody's going with a microphone to, okay.
Thank you for these very interesting reflections. I just wanted to remind the panel that the title of the panel was Witnessing the Devastation in Gaza. And although we've discussed a lot about the relationship between Jews and other Jews and the difficulties of doing this activism, we spent very little time witnessing the destruction in Gaza. So I was wondering if any of the panelists either wanted to spend some time doing that or reflecting on the difficulties in doing so in a setting like this.
Okay, the importance of witnessing the destruction of Gaza. Thank you for that. We're holding on to your anti-Zionism question, Kathleen. Let's go back over this way. I think the person right there. Yes, the person who's standing is the one I thought of. Sorry that I... Yeah.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for speaking. My name is Roly. My question's actually for Greg, but I'm curious, for anyone on the panel who might have an answer as well. A lot of times, as someone who's worked in the peace process in a very hands-on way, dealing with the reality on the ground and trying to move things forward, where do you see things going if peace is in fact going to be reality that can happen? Right now, the US administration, the Israeli administration, leadership around the world isn't necessarily seem to be favoring that kind of reality that we might all hope for. And I'm curious, based on your experience and your ideas and outlook right now, where that path might be paved.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take one more question, then we'll, yes, right here. Hold off. I think you should wait for the microphone. Arnold, can we, yeah, great.
I'm going to try briefly to be the devil's advocate here and say...
I think you're going to succeed.
Yes.
In the latter, but the former is the real challenge.
Okay. I mean, it looks to me like that the cause that we all believe in and that we think should be followed in Israel is not very popular there these days. And we're spitting into the wind, and it's not going to be us that's going to change. It's going to be something in reality that's going to change them. Why should we continue to pay attention and to fight in something that is so discouraging and losing right now?
Okay, thank you for that. All right, I know there are many other questions, but maybe we're soon to wrap up, 5 minutes. So I'm going to just begin with Esther and ask everybody to take up one small fragment of what you heard, maybe that last question, why continue to care, really? And then we'll move this way. Everybody has about 60 seconds.
So why do I care? I don't know. I care. I think I can't help it. I think I care about how the things happening in Israel impact our own community here, especially our more observant and Orthodox community. I believe our discourses impact each other. And I believe that, I do believe in some kind of agency that people working towards their aspirations make a difference ultimately.
Well, you should care because America is the greatest supporter of Israel. And we know that nothing could have really, Israel could not have had this policy for so many years if not for the support of Israel, of United States. And the relationship between the two and the interdependency and some kind in certain aspects and nurturing of each other's empire behaviors and aspirations. But you also should care because as Jews, you have a right any moment to become the citizens of Israel. You are potential citizens of Israel. So you are potential colonists, double colonists, you know, in America, of course. But that's why we have to look, that's why we cannot amend. We cannot amend Columbus, and we cannot amend Ben Gurion and the Nakba. We can only build up some other future, or I would say even...
Transform it into a positive Du Bois's double consciousness as a way of overcoming the double colonial burden.
There is a reason why I never went to the academy. And
Tell us.
So no, I think not even the future, but the present. And I want to thank the person who asked about, who reminded us that the topic was devastation of Gaza. But again, I want to say the devastation of Gaza, or before this devastation of Gaza, Israel decided to make Gaza disappear. And it shut it behind walls and curfew and closure and blockades, and separated it from the rest of the Palestinian people, and separated it from the rest of the Palestinian territory and from the world. So there is something which is incremental and gradual that affected the Israelis in their political imagination of how they can exercise their power. But it's Gaza. Yeah, the thing now is that people, both Palestinians, both in the West Bank and in Israel proper, think that Gaza is becoming a model that Israel wants to follow and to apply on them too, be it expulsion, mass expulsion outside of the country, or even mass killings or genocide inside. So this is the way that Israel is being perceived now by the Palestinian population. And so I want to repeat again what I said before. Israel is dangerous, and you should care for all the reasons, as human beings and as Jews and as Americans.
Thank you. You got a challenge. There are 2 or 3 questions to you, and you have 75 seconds additional.
Agree with everything that Amira said. I'm the only Palestinian on the panel, and I'm going to take 90 seconds, sorry. Around the devastation of Gaza, I'm going to be very transparent, and I don't mean this to be offensive in any way. I just want you to know I almost got up and left this panel. Like, that was an internal debate here. Because it was like, how are we supposed to handle all of this stuff? And there's no space to actually center that or talk about that. So I tried to get it in, and I stayed because I trust the people in this room. I trust you, David, and I know that you're going to go on this conversation. But it needs to be central. You need to understand these perspectives, and it can't be communicated in 30 seconds. This is deep work, and if you're frustrated why Palestinians aren't participating with you, it's because you have to do this work to show up and to ask us to come into these spaces. So that's critical. Anti-Zionism, Zionism, religion. Yes, but Zionism is a much more robust and matured intentional form of religiosity in my analysis. And I think that must be recognized and named. They're not sort of symmetrical in that sense. But there are lots of problems connected to anti-Semitism, which I think is my duty to name and see and resist, not just because it's a horror that we should all name and see and resist, but also because the rationale of Zionism is an antidote to anti-Semitism. And when there's an increase in anti-Semitism that we see today, not just its weaponization, my people suffer too. That's bad for all of us. But the reason why I'm here and where I want to end was Roly's question. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. But getting back to the peace process, one thing I neglected to mention is for my 4 years on the negotiating team, 3 of them, my actual job was this. It was to talk about Gaza 2020. This was 2005 to 2008. I worked on the disengagement from Gaza. Gaza 2020, the reason I was talking about, not because I was so brilliant, but everything you saw was predicted and predictable in great detail and preventable. Literally, I can come back here and give you presentations that I gave to our top diplomats in the world 20 years ago, talking about everything that you saw happen in Gaza. Disengagement was a shell game. It was to prevent the possibility of any Palestinian state ever. That was stated explicitly on the record by all of these Israeli politicians who were trusting now. Hamas, that was a strategic imperative to empower Hamas from the Israeli government as a way to divide and conquer the Palestinian people. This needs to be named, and this is very cynical and bleak, but it's true, and I have all the receipts for this. All of the receipts over decades. This was the strategy that we see unfolding today and is going into stage for the West Bank, for Jerusalem, for the Third Temple, all these crazy apocalyptic things. This is a reality. If we care about humanity, we have to stand up and act right now. And you're playing devil's advocate, but to me, this is the hopeful point where I want to land, because this is so dark and so terrible. And that's why I came with this conviction that I say is an act of faith in response to all of the available evidence right now. And the fact is that if something is predictable, the world often operates in 2 + 2 = 4. You cage a people based on who they are for years, starve them, bomb them, tell them that they're the criminals. People are going to resist. That's what Jabotinsky said in the Iron Wall. Read it, 3 pages. He said it, talking about Jewish colonization, piggybacking on the empire to enact this new reality. And of course Palestinians are going to resist. That's why we have to drive them out, right? This is human nature. We all did, and we all would. So much is predictable, was predicted, is preventable. And so right now, we are at a consequential moment. The moment we are in right now, and the moment that should convict all of us. October 8th, the building next door was on fire. There was gas tanks in the basement, children dying, and here we were comfortable. And we were fighting amongst ourselves. Well, who started it? Who's to blame? Oh, we have to answer. Who's going to rebuild? When we had one job was to put out the fire and save as many kids as possible because we knew where this was headed. This was talked about for decades, right? Today, our building is on fire. Those are the stakes. This is the stake of all of our future. And we, as Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Muslims, Christians, avid non-believers, we are these small minorities, less than 40 million people worldwide, and people jumping and listening to the Palestinian story today. I'm so glad, so grateful that people will finally listen to my story without saying, well, what about this? What about that? But the reality is that many people jumping on our bandwagons today don't give a fuck about any of us. Post-Holocaust, post-Nakba, we are unfortunately stuck together. The only way out is human rights. The institutions that protected human rights are disintegrating before our eyes, being dismantled by Republicans and Democrats. This is not a partisan point. And so why I'm leaving and saying this is hopeful is because there's still something we can do. We can show up, especially when it seems impossible. But we have to be honest with ourselves and each other about the stakes right now. They could not be higher. We do not have the luxury of turning away. If we turn away, everything we love and value is destroyed, and in the end, we become horrible people who sanctioned genocide. That's wrong, and we have a choice. Maybe we can't stop that over there, but maybe we can do our best to be the kind of people who say, no, we do not have to be this way. And that's our challenge today.
Really glad you didn't leave. Aharon, a brief last word, then we'll hear a brief word from Michal, and we'll wrap up, and we'll do that hopefully before 1 o'clock. I'll try to answer Kathleen's question maybe after. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of what we have to be doing sort of moving forward and why we're talking about this and the inherent connection it has with the destruction in Gaza is because a lot of why this was able to get to this point is because institutions that viewed themselves as liberal, that viewed themselves as progressive, that were Jewish, following October 7th, decided that this entire project of being a progressive Jew was one they were calling into question, and that in order to stay either in their communities or in their identity, that they fell back towards a unity with a very, very far right-wing position. And part of what we need to be doing here is figure out, should circumstances arise again where something like that would happen, how do we make sure that we don't do that? And that we can say, from day one, even as we are grieving, even as we are in immense pain, that we cannot allow the circumstances that led to genocide in Gaza. That's a conversation that we need to be having in some ways internally. It's a conversation that we need to be having with a very, very sharp ear, listening to Palestinian voices. And it's a conversation that needs to happen also all over as we read books, as we educate ourselves, and get to a place where we are ready to be the progressives, the allies, and those intertwined in this struggle for liberation with the Palestinian people moving forward. That also means that today, in addition to sort of moving ourselves to that place, we need to be taking actions very, very urgently that are sometimes very scary for us, that are sometimes very difficult for us when we're in community with other people for whom this is sort of an attack on their Zionism, on their identity, but are necessary in the current moment to be talking about supporting a movement for boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel.
Okay. Michal, that may be a point for you to jump in with a last word.
Yeah.
Final thought.
Sure. So I'll say briefly. First, and this isn't nitpicking, I didn't say theological problem, I said theological question. And I don't think it's a question, and I think it's a question which pertains to a lot of people in this room, because no matter what words you use to identify yourself, Zionist, non-Zionist, anti-Zionist, at the end of the day, so much of our tradition centers the holiness of the land of Israel. So one still needs to have a conversation about that. A third of our Mishnah is about keeping commandments in Israel. And I'm not saying this from a Zionist perspective, I'm saying this from a perspective of Jews who need to think about what our relationship is, not only with power, and but with land, and even more so if the conversation of how Zionism articulates its theology bothers you, then one needs to create a different avenue into the conversation of the land of Israel, because there is no ability to talk about the Jewish tradition without talking about the land of Israel. The second point that I would say regarding identity, is just show up to the protest. You can identify yourself this way, you can identify yourself that way. That's important and that's fine, and there's room for those ideological conversations. But show up. If settler violence bothers you, show up. Come there as a Zionist, come there as a non-Zionist. It doesn't really matter. If Gaza bothers you, show up, come to the protest. It's crucial, it's critical, and I think it's much more important. We get so bogged down by these ideological conversations, and I think what's important is really building political opposition. And the third point would be that I think at the end of the day, there are around 50%, a bit more, a bit less, of Jews living in Israel now. The question of what, as Amira said, the question of what should have happened or could have happened is important from a historical perspective. But the question of what happens now and what happens in the future is really our more important question to ask. And in that context, I'd like to hope and I'd like to believe that Smol Emuni offers a way into that. And that relates to something that Greg said earlier. I don't feel that I'm stuck with Palestinians in Israel, Palestine. I feel that it's my greatest nightmare that Palestinians won't be living in the land. And it's my greatest hope that we'll be living together as two peoples on the same land. It's not just that we're stuck here by unfortunate circumstances. It's really by, as Shmuel Hugo Bergman said, the grace of God, that we have the ability to live as two peoples in the same land. And I think that should be the way that we go about looking forward at this, not as some sort of frustrated thing that we need to compromise on. And I'm sure, I imagine Greg doesn't disagree. That notion that we have to be together, that it's a b'diavad and not a lechatchila, is something that I think maybe is a key moving forward. And thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to say that.
Okay, so we've heard from one panelist to the next a range of perspectives. I think the good news is everybody can find something with which they disagree. But I think also there's a lot on which we agree. And I think we agree on the centering, the imperative of confronting the tragedy that has been inflicted upon Palestinians in Gaza as a moral imperative, but also the imperative of recognizing the necessity of living alongside and together with one another in the ways that Bergman regarded as that great divine gift. And what I think we offered in sort of coming out of some of those darkest reflections was a reminder of the imperative of a new kind of coalition building that does not rest on the vertical alliance that has been such a foundation of Jewish political identity, where Jews identify with the state, but in fact reminding ourselves of the importance of the shared experiences of minorities suffering oppression and transforming that into a politics of radical change, not the internalization of the experience of oppression that turns you into an oppressor. So with that prospect of coalitions that seem distant but are also very proximate to us, we will thank our panelists for this morning for such a stimulating conversation, and we will indeed move forward in the afternoon to build upon the important work that has been done this morning. So thank you all.
Wait for just 1 minute so I can give a few instructions. Yeah, huge appreciation to our panelists this morning, and to have Michael with us in this room meant a lot. I just want to say very briefly what we're doing. We're behind schedule, but we're going to be fine. I promise. Bathrooms. There are bathrooms downstairs. You go through there. Frankel Hall's downstairs. There are bathrooms there. Bathrooms on this hallway through here. We're going to be having lunch in just a moment up in the gym, 3rd floor. There are 2 elevators and there's stairs. There are bathrooms up there. So lunch is next. And then very quickly, please take time to process what you heard this morning, and to be with each other as we work through what we need to work through and get ready for the next, our next time together. The conversation and Torah circles are happening after lunch. Please check your programs, check the big posters. There's some really hard choices to make about where to put yourself, but these are designed for smaller conversations around important topics. Please note we do have one topic that's not directly related to Israel-Palestine. That'll be about immigration here in the sanctuary. For those who are live streaming, 5 of our 7 breakout sessions are being live streamed. Please check the YouTube channel live to figure out where exactly to go. And everything else is on the schedule. To orient, this is the sanctuary. Downstairs in this building is Frankel Hall. All the other breakouts are either on this floor or on the 4th floor. 1:45 are breakout sessions. B'tei Avon. Enjoy your lunch.